Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Hone Your Speaker Skills, How to Be a Better Speaker. Hold on. For technical fun. As I was saying, how to be a better speaker, how to look at story. We started off last week with an overview of the anatomy of a story. Well, I want to go into a deep dive week by week on the different elements. And today we're going to take up the protagonist, the hero. Who is the hero of your story? Well, I want to take you back in time, even before we get as far as the story. Who's the story aimed at? What story is going to be relevant to your particular audience? What is it that you're trying to illustrate? Not trying to illustrate. What is it you are illustrating? You have a point that you want to make. So in order to do that, what's your purpose? Okay, you're going to work out your purpose first. And then you know who you're talking to. So who's going to appeal most to them in terms of the protagonist, the hero of the story? Now, the hero may be you. The hero may be one of your clients. It may be a composite person, somebody who's made up. It may not be a specific one person, but one that you've brought together elements that are going to match up with the person that you're ideally talking to. So that as you're explaining about the character, as you're giving them depth, the audience who's reading your work, reading your book, listening to you talking about it, starts to identify themselves in your main character, in your hero. The whole point is you want your audience to be the hero, don't you? Bring them along with you. So even before you put pen to paper, get your message ready, work out what's your purpose, what's the point of the story, who would be the ideal character to be the hero here. Now, if you're illustrating a point that this is how you work and this is the journey that you've been on, then absolutely you have to be the hero. It's one that you are illustrating how you support, how you transform the lives of your clients, then that is where the hero would ideally be one of your clients, or, as I said, a composite of them who is going to be relatable to your ideal audience, somebody that they can relate to. Now, the details you give of this character are going to set the scene, are going to be what's relatable to the audience. And as I said, I use audience as in reader, as also hearer, as you're talking. So what's going to be relevant? What do you need to in person? Are you aiming to speak to a female audience? Then make your character a woman. What sort of age is she? I'm going down this one road, okay? Don't turn your ears off if you're a fella, and you'll adapt, okay? So I've made the decision that my target audience for this particular tale is females of middle-ish age, kind of like myself. And so I'm going to give details of her physical stature. She may have wisdom highlights, something that we older ladies tend to try and mask. There may be issues around having to wear glasses that she lost while walking, and she lost a pair of glasses in Melbourne a few weeks ago. My point is, what is going to be relevant about the physicality of your prime character, your hero, that's going to be relevant to your audience? It may well be relevant to you, particularly if it's yourself. It may be relevant to your client / composite client. But is it going to be relevant to your audience? The reason I'm mentioning this is because when I've worked with authors in the past who've been talking about their wonderful story that they've been on, they've described in vivid detail, down to the nth degree, what they were wearing. Now, you're wearing red shoes, then fair enough. Otherwise, if your name's not Dorothy and you're not going over the rainbow, do I need to know your shoes were red? You get my point. So think about the amount of detail that you give. Is it relevant to what's coming next? Now, I would only mention the fact that my hero wears glasses when she can't read things easily, because I'm going to tell the tale of my glasses falling out of my pouch as I'm walking down the street somewhere in this area in Melbourne, and how I went to retrace my steps. I went and left my phone number with all the people that could possibly find it. And no, I didn't get any response to it. So that the story, do you get my meaning? Otherwise, if I'm talking about glasses aren't involved at all, then I wouldn't even mention it. The details have to be relevant to the story to move it on. Trust this is making sense. So the physicality, how you would describe the physical characteristics of your hero. Think about also the characteristics, the personality traits. Again, what's going to be relevant to the story, to your target audience? Again, you're going back to the purpose of what it is you are conveying, the purpose of your story, the point to your story. Now, as I'm mentioning this, think about those illustrative stories that you want to use. Go back in your own life. Are there examples of stories that illustrate your points that you want to make in your work that you've experienced? Start thinking about having a story bank if you haven't already got one. Go back and think, well, this happened to me. What was relevant at that point in my life to what I'm now showing people how to do? What were the characteristics that I was displaying before, during a process, and after? The before ones are relevant if you're going to develop them and transform them to the after ones. I trust I'm making sense. You give the amount of detail that's going to be relevant to where you're going and the point you're making. Otherwise, so what? Who cares? There's always got to be a reason behind it. If you think about it, the way I heard somebody say, each word, if you're as the author, each word is taking up real estate. It's got to earn its keep. If it's not relevant to what comes next in the plot, scrap it. Same thing with your talks. If that detail is not relevant to where you're going with it, leave it out. Physical characteristics, personality traits. Describe the person with your verbal picture. Have the audience really come in on this one. Have them visualize what this person looks like and how they behave. Now, next week, we're going to pick up on a little bit about, you may or may not have supporting actors. But I'm not going to cover that a great deal next week, because the thing is that can be part of this topic. You're thinking about what's relevant. Are the supporting actors needed at all? Yes, you may think, well, my husband's around. Well, is he relevant to this story? No. Okay, don't mention him. My point being, what's important to move the story on? If it's not a relevant detail, leave it out. So that's what I'm going to give you today to think about in terms of creating your story bank. Describe the relevant details of your hero. Physicality, personality traits. What makes them tick? How would they behave in XYZ situation? That's important because we're going to come on to that in future weeks. That's what I've got for you this week. If you haven't already, as I said, think about creating a story bank. Now, I gave you some headlines, if you will, some parameters last week when we talked about the anatomy. Develop a spreadsheet, if you will, and actually list what's important under each of those topics so that you can follow through, so that when you actually write your chapter, your book, or you actually prepare your talk, you've got all those elements covered in your story. The other thing I would suggest you do is think about if there are any props that you might want, show and tell style, because those can be very powerful as well. But right now, let's focus on the details of the story and the character. That's your homework for this week. Work out what's important, what's the purpose that you are telling this story for, and let's deep dive into that hero. What's important to the story you're telling about that hero. Have a great week. Next week, we are going to look at the conflict, what the problem is, because there will be some form of baddie, if you will. Protagonist can be a person, can be a situation, but that's where we're going next week. We've got the hero. Next week,